My name is Emma Rodriguez, and 18 months after my ex-boyfriend Tyler broke up with me for someone more ambitious, I found myself sitting in the back corner of his wedding reception, watching him dance with the woman he chose instead. Table 12, right next to the kitchen doors where the catering staff kept bumping my chair. The invitation had been a surprise, honestly. A cream-colored envelope that arrived 3 weeks earlier with my name written in careful calligraphy, like an afterthought someone felt obligated to include. I almost didn't come, but sometimes you need to see the final chapter of a story to truly close the book. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. What I didn't expect was Jessica Parker, the bride, finding me during her own reception and asking if we could talk privately. What she said in that bridal suite changed everything I thought I knew about the life Tyler had built without me, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The drive to Riverside Gardens Event Center in Sacramento felt like traveling back in time. Same route Tyler and I used to take to his parents' house, same exit off Highway 50, same nervous flutter in my stomach that I hadn't felt in over a year. I'd spent 45 minutes getting ready, changing outfits 3 times before settling on a navy blue wrap dress that was elegant but not attention-seeking. The last thing I wanted was to be the ex-girlfriend who showed up trying to upstage the bride. I parked in the back row of the lot, behind a row of SUVs that probably belonged to Tyler's college friends. Through my windshield, I could see the venue's gardens in full spring bloom, white roses climbing trellises and string lights already twinkling, even though sunset was still hours away. It was beautiful, exactly the kind of place Tyler used to say we'd get married someday back when we were still planning a future together. The ceremony was scheduled for 4, reception at 6. I checked my phone, 3:45. Perfect timing to slip in just before it started, and find a seat in the back where I could observe without being observed. That was my plan, anyway. Walking across the parking lot, I spotted familiar faces heading toward the garden entrance. Tyler's cousin Marcus, who always remembered my birthday. His aunt Linda, who used to text me recipes even after Tyler and I broke up. They saw me approaching, and their faces lit up with genuine warmth. "Emma, oh my God, you look amazing," Linda said, pulling me into a hug that smelled like her signature vanilla perfume. "How have you been, sweetheart? We've missed you at family dinners." Marcus nodded enthusiastically. "Seriously, Tyler's new girlfriend is nice and all, but she doesn't laugh at my dad jokes like you did." Their kindness felt like a warm blanket, but also a reminder of everything I'd lost when Tyler and I ended. Not just him, but his entire extended family who had embraced me for 3 years. People who still sent me Christmas cards and tagged me in funny Facebook posts until Tyler asked them to stop because it made Jessica uncomfortable. "I've been really good actually," I told them, and meant it. "Started my own business, staying busy." "That's wonderful," Linda said. "Tyler mentioned you were doing some kind of design work." "Some kind of design work." I smiled and nodded, not bothering to correct her. Tyler had always downplayed my career aspirations when we were together, calling my interior design dreams cute and suggesting I should focus on something more stable. He had no idea that Rodriguez Renovations now had a 6-month waiting list and had been featured twice in Sacramento magazine for historic home restoration projects. He had no idea because he never asked. We found seats together in the middle section of white folding chairs arranged in perfect rows facing an archway covered in white peonies and greenery. The garden buzzed with conversation as guests settled in, programs fluttering in the gentle breeze. I recognized about half the faces from Tyler's social circle, though many of them seemed not to recognize me, or perhaps they were simply being polite, pretending not to notice the ex-girlfriend who'd somehow made it onto the guest list. At exactly 4 o'clock, the string quartet began playing Canon in D, and Tyler appeared at the altar with his best man Brad, the same guy who used to crash on our couch every weekend and leave pizza boxes on my coffee table. Tyler looked good, I had to admit. Navy suit, hair perfectly styled, that confident smile that had first attracted me to him at a mutual friend's barbecue 4 years ago. He scanned the crowd, and for just a moment, his eyes found mine. A brief nod of acknowledgement, nothing more. Then the bridal party began their procession. Jessica's sister Rachel as maid of honor, followed by Tyler's sister and 2 other women I didn't recognize, all in dusty rose dresses that complemented the garden setting beautifully. Finally the music swelled, and Jessica appeared on her father's arm. I'll give credit where it's due. She looked stunning. Her dress was a classic A-line with delicate beading that caught the afternoon light, her blonde hair swept into an elegant updo with small white flowers woven throughout. She moved with the grace of someone who'd dreamed of this moment her entire life, every step deliberate and perfect for the photographer capturing each angle. Watching Tyler's face as she walked down the aisle, I felt something I hadn't expected: relief. Not jealousy, not regret, just a quiet sense of closure. This was his choice, his future, his happiness, and seeing him light up as Jessica approached the altar confirmed what I'd suspected for months now. We hadn't been right for each other. We'd been comfortable, familiar, safe. But we hadn't been this. The ceremony was lovely and traditional. They'd written their own vows, which surprised me since Tyler used to joke that he'd never be the type to get sentimental in public. But there he was, promising to be Jessica's adventure partner and biggest cheerleader, to support her dreams and build a beautiful life together. Jessica's vows were equally heartfelt, mentioning their shared vision for their future home and family, how Tyler made her feel like the best version of herself. I found myself genuinely happy for them, which felt like its own small victory. 18 months ago, I couldn't have imagined sitting here without bitterness. But time and distance had given me perspective, and honestly, success had given me confidence. The Emma who'd been devastated by Tyler's breakup speech about needing someone more driven was not the same Emma who now ran her own thriving business and had recently been approached about a potential television pilot featuring home renovation projects. After the ceremony, there was a cocktail hour while the wedding party took photos. I mingled politely with other guests, nursing a glass of the signature cocktail that was apparently called the Parker Mitchell, a lavender gin fizz that was actually quite good. I made small talk with Tyler's coworkers and caught up with a few mutual friends who seemed surprised but pleased to see me. "Emma, I can't believe you're here," said Sarah, a friend from Tyler's work. "How are you doing? Are you seeing anyone?" The questions were inevitable, asked with the curiosity of people who remembered the drama but were too polite to be direct about it. I kept my answers cheerful and brief. Yes, I was doing well. No, not seeing anyone seriously at the moment. Yes, I was happy Tyler had found someone who made him happy. What I didn't mention was that I'd had several dates in recent months, including a promising connection with David, an architect I'd met through a client referral. We'd been texting regularly and had dinner plans.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
For the following weekend, but that felt too personal to share in this setting. Too much like trying to prove something I didn't need to prove anymore. As cocktail hour wound down, guests began moving toward the reception hall. I checked my phone and saw a text from my best friend Maya. "How's it going? Need an emergency escape call?" I typed back quickly. "Actually fine, weird but fine. Talk later." The reception hall was decorated beautifully, with round tables draped in ivory linens and centerpieces of white roses and eucalyptus. Soft lighting created an intimate atmosphere despite the size of the room, and I could tell someone had put considerable thought into every detail. I found my table number on the seating chart. Table 12, in the back corner near the kitchen entrance. The placement wasn't subtle, but it wasn't unexpected either. Tyler's family would be at the front tables near the head table, his close friends scattered throughout the middle section. Table 12 was where you put the people you felt obligated to invite, but didn't necessarily want in your wedding photos. My table mates were exactly what I'd anticipated, Tyler's single cousin who lived 3 states away and only saw the family at weddings and funerals, a coworker of Jessica's who'd brought a date who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, and an elderly couple who turned out to be distant relatives of Jessica's family. Pleasant enough people, but clearly we'd all been grouped together as the miscellaneous guests category. Dinner was served during the toasts, which meant I had a perfect view of the head table while trying to cut my chicken and pretend I was fully engaged in conversation about whether the salad dressing was balsamic or red wine vinaigrette. Tyler's father gave a predictable but sweet toast about gaining a daughter. Jessica's father welcomed Tyler to the family with enthusiasm that seemed genuine. Brad's best man speech hit all the expected notes about Tyler's bachelor days and how Jessica had tamed him. Then Jessica stood up with her champagne glass, which surprised me. Brides didn't usually give toasts at their own weddings, but Jessica had never been one to follow traditional rules entirely. "I know this is a little unconventional," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the room, despite the lack of a microphone, "but I wanted to say something to all of you who came here to celebrate with Tyler and me." She looked radiant standing there, confident and poised, the epitome of a woman who'd gotten everything she'd ever wanted. I found myself admiring her composure, even if I still felt like an outsider looking in. When Tyler and I started dating, I'll be honest, I was intimidated by the idea of measuring up to his past. She continued, and my stomach tightened slightly. Was she really going to mention me in her wedding toast? But what I've learned is that our past relationships don't define us. They prepare us for the love we're meant to have. Polite murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. I concentrated on my dinner, hoping to become invisible until this moment passed. Tyler has made me a better person, and I hope I've done the same for him. We're building something beautiful together, and I can't wait to make our house a home filled with love and laughter, and maybe someday the patter of little feet. The room erupted in applause and ahs as Tyler stood to kiss his new wife. I clapped politely along with everyone else, but something about her words stuck with me. The way she'd emphasized our house and make it a home with such fervor suggested this was more than just general newlywed excitement. There was an urgency there, almost like she was trying to convince herself as much as the room. The evening continued with all the traditional wedding elements. The first dance to Ed Sheeran's Perfect, which made me slightly roll my eyes since Tyler used to complain about how overplayed that song was. The father-daughter dance that made Jessica tear up. The bouquet toss that I strategically avoided by visiting the ladies' room at just the right moment. I was planning to make my exit during the cake cutting, right after I'd fulfilled my social obligation of staying through dinner and toasts. I'd already said goodbye to Linda and Marcus, who'd invited me to their anniversary party next month with genuine enthusiasm. My purse was in my lap, car keys ready, when someone tapped me on the shoulder. I turned to find Jessica standing beside my chair, having somehow crossed the entire reception hall without my noticing. Up close, she looked even more beautiful, though I could see the slight smudge of mascara that suggested happy tears during the toasts. "Emma, could I talk to you privately for just a minute?" The request was so unexpected that I almost asked her to repeat it. Around our table, conversation had stopped entirely. Tyler's cousin stared openly, clearly recognizing the drama potential of the bride seeking out the ex-girlfriend for a private conversation. Of course, I managed, setting down my napkin and following her toward the exit. She led me through a hallway, lined with framed photos of other couples who'd celebrated their weddings at Riverside Gardens, stopping at a door marked Bridal Suite. Inside was a comfortable sitting area with a vanity, full-length mirrors, and a small couch where her wedding dress train could be spread out safely. Jessica closed the door behind us and turned to face me, her expression more serious than I'd seen it all evening. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Two women connected by the same man but otherwise complete strangers. "I hope this isn't weird," she began, smoothing her skirt nervously. "I needed to ask you something, and I figured it was better to be direct than to wonder about it forever." I nodded, genuinely curious about where this conversation was heading. "What can I help you with?" She took a breath, as if steeling herself for something difficult. Tyler mentioned that you do interior design work, like, professionally. I do, yes. I have my own company now, Rodriguez Renovations. Her eyes widened slightly. Rodriguez Renovations, you're Emma Rodriguez, the designer. The recognition in her voice surprised me. You've heard of my company, heard of it. She laughed, a sound that held both disbelief and excitement. Emma, I've been obsessed with your work for months. That historic Victorian restoration you did in Land Park that was featured in Sacramento magazine. I've had that article bookmarked since it came out. And the Craftsman Bungalow project with the sustainable materials. I must have sent that link to Tyler a dozen times. I stared at her, processing this information. Tyler had never mentioned that Jessica was interested in my work. In fact, based on his dismissive comments about my little design hobby, I'd assumed he'd never even told her about my professional accomplishments. Tyler never mentioned that you knew about my projects, I said carefully. Jessica's expression shifted, becoming slightly uncomfortable. To be honest, I don't think Tyler made the connection. I mean, he knew you did design stuff, but Rodriguez Renovations, he didn't realize that was you. I only figured it out tonight when Linda mentioned your last name and it clicked. Of course he hadn't made the connection. Tyler had been so determined to minimize my work when we were together that he'd probably blocked out any evidence of my success afterward. It was easier to maintain his narrative that he'd upgraded from someone directionless to someone ambitious if he didn't acknowledge that I'd built exactly the kind of career I'd always dreamed of. So what did you want to ask me? I prompted gently. Jessica glanced toward the door, as if making sure we wouldn't be interrupted, then looked back at me with an expression that was part desperation, part hope. Tyler and I bought a house in Roseville 6 months ago. It's a 1920s Craftsman with amazing bones, but it needs so much work, and I have this vision for what it could be, but every designer I've hired just doesn't get it. They want to make it all modern and open concept, but that's not what the house wants, you know? I keep showing them your magazine features and saying like this, but for our house, but they just don't understand. She was speaking faster now, the words tumbling out like she'd been holding them back for months. I saw your portfolio online, and the way you restored those period details while making everything functional for modern living, it's exactly what I want for our house. The problem is, she paused, biting her lip. The problem is, I already know Tyler would never agree to hire his ex-girlfriend to design our home. He'd think it was weird, and honestly, maybe it would be weird. But Emma, I've been trying to make this house work for 6 months, and I'm running out of ideas and patience. I found myself in the surreal position of sitting in a bridal suite, being asked by my ex-boyfriend's new wife to help her create their dream home. The irony was so complete, it almost felt like fiction. That's a complicated situation, I said slowly. I know it is, and I'm not even sure what I'm asking, exactly. Maybe just, could you look at some photos? Give me some advice. I could pay you for a consultation, obviously. I just need someone who understands historic homes and period-appropriate renovation. Someone who gets that just because something is old doesn't mean it has to be updated beyond recognition. There was something raw in her voice, a vulnerability I hadn't expected. This wasn't just about interior design, this was about her trying to build a life with Tyler, trying to create a home that reflected their shared vision, and struggling to make him understand why it mattered so much to her. Jessica, I said carefully, can I ask you something? Why is this house so important to you? She was quiet for a moment, staring down at her engagement ring, a princess-cut solitaire that caught the light from the vanity bulbs. Tyler thinks I'm being obsessive about it, she said finally. He says a house is just a place to live, that I'm getting too caught up in decorating magazines and Pinterest boards. But it's not about decorating, it's about building something together, you know? Creating a space that reflects who we are as a couple. She looked up at me, and I saw something I recognized from my own past with Tyler, the feeling of being misunderstood by someone you loved. I thought if I could just get the house right, if I could show him how beautiful it could be, he'd understand why it matters to me. But every contractor and designer I've worked with just wants to gut everything that makes the house special and turn it into something generic. And Tyler just sees the bills and the delays and gets frustrated with the whole process. I felt a familiar ache, remembering my own attempts to make Tyler understand my passion for design, my dreams of building something meaningful with my career. He'd never been intentionally dismissive, just practically minded in a way that couldn't quite grasp why aesthetics and craftsmanship mattered beyond their functional purpose. I understand completely, I told her, and meant it. Historic homes have souls, you can't just strip that away and expect the heart of the place to survive. Exactly. Her face lit up. That's exactly what I've been trying to explain, but Tyler thinks I'm being overly sentimental about a bunch of old wood and plaster. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, two women who'd both loved the same man and discovered his limitations in different ways. I found myself genuinely liking Jessica, which was not at all what I'd expected when I'd decided to attend this wedding. "Can I see some photos of the house?" I heard myself asking. Jessica's entire demeanor changed, hope flooding her features. "Really, you'd be willing to look?" "I can't promise anything beyond just looking, and maybe offering some general thoughts," I said quickly. "The situation with Tyler would be complicated, I understand. I would be so grateful for any input from someone who actually gets what I'm trying to do." She pulled out her phone and scrolled through what appeared to be hundreds of photos of their house. As she showed me picture after picture, I could see both the problems and the potential. It was indeed a beautiful 1920s craftsman with original hardwood floors, built-in bookcases, and period fixtures that had been partially preserved through previous renovations. But there were also clearly some questionable updates from the 1980s and 2000s that clashed with the home's original character. "The kitchen is the biggest challenge," Jessica was saying, swiping to photos of a space that had been opened up to the living room in a way that destroyed the home's original flow. "The previous owners took out a wall that I think was load-bearing, and now it just feels wrong. Like the house is confused about what it's supposed to be." I studied the images, my mind automatically cataloging solutions. The kitchen could be restored to respect the home's period character while maintaining modern functionality, but it would require someone who understood both historic preservation and contemporary living needs. "You're right about the wall," I said. "Taking that out changed the entire proportion of the space. The original layout would have had a more defined kitchen with a proper dining room adjacent." "Yes, that's exactly what I keep trying to explain. I don't need a giant open concept space. I want distinct rooms that flow together naturally, the way the house was designed." Her enthusiasm was infectious, and I found myself genuinely excited about the design challenges her house presented. It had been several months since I'd worked on a full historic restoration, and this project had the kind of complexity I found most rewarding. "Jessica, can I ask you something personal?" She nodded. "Do you think Tyler would actually be opposed to hiring me specifically, or would he be opposed to the expense and time of a proper historic renovation in general?" She considered the question seriously. "Honestly, probably both. He's already frustrated with how much we've spent on contractors who haven't delivered what we wanted. And hiring his ex-girlfriend would definitely seem weird to him. But Emma, I'm running out of options. We've been living with half-finished projects for months, and it's starting to affect our relationship." I could hear wedding guests laughing and music playing from the reception hall, reminding me that this was Jessica's wedding night and she was spending it asking her husband's ex-girlfriend for design advice. The whole situation was bizarre, but there was something touching about her desperation to create a home she could love. What if I offered some general guidance without Tyler knowing who it was coming from? I found myself suggesting, "I could review your photos, suggest some approaches, maybe recommend contractors who specialize in historic preservation. You could present the ideas as your own research." Jessica's eyes widened. "You would really do that?" I think every historic home deserves to be restored with respect for its original character, I said. And honestly, I've been where you are, trying to make Tyler understand why something mattered to me that seemed frivolous to him. She reached over and squeezed my hand, a gesture that felt surprisingly natural despite the strangeness of our situation. Thank you, Emma, this means more to me than you know. A knock on the door interrupted us. Jess, everything okay in there? Tyler's voice, concerned and slightly impatient. Jessica and I looked at each other, sharing a moment of conspiratorial understanding. Just fixing my makeup. Jessica called back, I'll be right out. She stood and smoothed her dress, transforming back into the radiant bride who belonged at the center of this celebration. But before opening the door, she turned back to me. My email is jessicaparker.design@gmail. Could you send me your thoughts when you have a chance? I'll put together some preliminary ideas this week, I promised. She smiled, and for the first time all evening, it looked completely genuine. Thank you, Emma. Really. As she opened the door to rejoin her wedding reception, I remained in the bridal suite for another moment, trying to process what had just happened. 6 hours ago, I'd walked into this wedding as Tyler's discarded ex-girlfriend, relegated to the back table and excluded from family photos. Now I was secretly collaborating with his wife to create the home he'd never understood. I was capable of designing. The situation was complicated, potentially messy, and definitely unconventional. But it was also an opportunity to do what I did best, help someone create a space that reflected their dreams and respected the history of the building that would house their future. I gathered my purse and headed back toward the reception, planning to make my exit now that my unexpected conversation with Jessica had concluded. But as I passed the main hall, I could see Tyler and Jessica on the dance floor, swaying to a slow song, looking every inch the happy couple they were supposed to be. Tyler caught sight of me through the doorway and nodded again, the same polite acknowledgement he'd given me during the ceremony. He had no idea that his wife had just asked his ex-girlfriend to help design their dream home. He had no idea that the woman he'd left for being insufficiently ambitious was about to give his new wife exactly what she'd been unsuccessfully trying to create for months. As I walked to my car under the string lights that made the garden look like something from a fairy tale, I felt a sense of completion I hadn't expected. Not closure exactly, but something better, purpose. Tyler had moved on to build his new life, and that was exactly as it should be. But maybe, in some small way, I could help him build it better than he'd ever imagined possible. The irony wasn't lost on me. The woman he'd chosen over me was about to benefit from exactly the skills he'd never valued when we were together. And somehow, that felt like the most satisfying ending to our story I could have written. The drive home from the wedding felt different than the drive there. The same roads, the same exits, but I was carrying something unexpected, a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. Jessica's request kept replaying in my mind as I navigated the familiar streets back to my midtown loft. The desperation in her voice when she talked about their house, the way her face lit up when she recognized my work, the irony that Tyler's new wife was seeking help from the very ex-girlfriend he'd dismissed as unambitious. My apartment welcomed me with the soft glow of strategically placed lamps and the scent of the eucalyptus arrangement I'd refreshed that morning. This space was my sanctuary and my showcase, a 200-square-foot testament to what could be accomplished with vision, patience, and respect for architectural integrity. The exposed brick walls and original hardwood floors had been carefully restored, while modern touches like updated lighting and a sleek kitchen island created perfect harmony between past and present. I kicked off my heels and poured myself a glass of wine, settling onto the vintage velvet sofa I'd reupholstered in a deep emerald green. Jessica's photos were still fresh in my memory, and I found myself mentally cataloging solutions for each room she'd shown me. The house had incredible potential, but it would require someone who understood both historic preservation and modern functionality to unlock it properly. My laptop sat on the coffee table where I'd left it that morning, and almost without thinking, I opened it and began typing notes about what I'd observed in Jessica's photos. The kitchen layout issues, the period inappropriate fixtures that could be replaced, the original architectural details that deserved to be highlighted rather than hidden. Within 20 minutes, I had 3 pages of preliminary observations and suggestions. This was exactly the kind of project that excited me most, a historic home with owners who genuinely wanted to honor its character while creating a functional modern living space. The fact that one of those owners was Tyler, and the other was the woman he'd chosen over me, added layers of complexity that I wasn't entirely sure how to navigate. But the designer in me couldn't ignore a house that needed saving, regardless of who owned it. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "How was the wedding? Did you survive seeing Tyler get married?" I typed back, "Survived and then some. You're not going to believe what happened. Emergency debrief session required. I have wine and ice cream. Rain check. I need to work on something while it's fresh in my mind. Mysterious. Call me tomorrow." I set the phone aside and opened a new document on my laptop, beginning to organize my thoughts into something resembling a consultation report. If I was going to help Jessica, I wanted to do it right. She deserved more than casual advice. She deserved a comprehensive plan that could transform her house into the home she'd been dreaming of. The next morning brought a flurry of emails in my Rodriguez Renovations inbox. A potential new client interested in a Victorian restoration, a contractor asking about tile selections for an ongoing project, and 3 inquiries about consulting services that had come through my website overnight. Business had been steadily growing since that first Sacramento magazine feature, and I was approaching the point where I'd need to hire additional staff to keep up with demand. But first, I wanted to finish what I'd started the night before. I spent the morning refining my notes about Jessica and Tyler's house, researching period-appropriate fixtures and materials that would suit their budget, and creating a preliminary timeline for the kind of restoration that would truly honor the home's 1920s craftsman heritage. By noon, I had a 12-page document that outlined everything from structural considerations to paint colors, complete with links to suppliers and recommended contractors who specialized in historic preservation. It was far more comprehensive than what Jessica had asked for, but I'd never been able to do anything halfway. If I was going to consult on this project, even anonymously, I wanted to give them a roadmap for success. I was reviewing the document one final time when my phone rang. Maya's name appeared on the screen, and I answered on the second ring. "Okay, I've been patient for exactly 18 hours, which is a record for me," she said without preamble. "What happened at the wedding that required mysterious work sessions?" Maya had been my closest friend since architecture school, where we bonded over late-night studio sessions and a shared appreciation for buildings that had stories to tell. She'd watched my entire relationship with Tyler unfold and had been the one to hold me together when it ended. If anyone would understand the complexity of my current situation, it would be her. The bride asked me to help design their house, I said, deciding to lead with the most shocking part. Silence on the other end of the line. "Then I'm sorry, what now?" Tyler's new wife Jessica recognized my work from magazine features and asked if I could consult on their house renovation. Apparently she's been trying to restore a 1920s craftsman for months and can't find a designer who gets what she's trying to accomplish. "And you said yes." I said I'd put together some general guidance. "She doesn't think Tyler would be comfortable hiring his ex-girlfriend directly, so I'm providing anonymous consultation." Maya's laugh was equal parts amazement and disbelief. "Emma Rodriguez, you are living in a romantic comedy. This is insane. It's a professional opportunity, I corrected, though even as I said it, I knew it sounded unconvincing. It's Tyler's house. Tyler, who spent 3 years telling you that interior design was a cute hobby. Tyler, who broke up with you because you weren't ambitious enough. And now his wife wants to hire you to design their dream home. When she put it like that, the irony was almost overwhelming. I know how it sounds, but Maya, you should see this house. It's exactly the kind of project I love, and she genuinely understands what historic preservation should look like. She's not trying to gut everything and start over, she wants to honor what's already there. And Tyler has no idea his wife is collaborating with his ex-girlfriend. Not unless Jessica tells him, which she seems pretty sure she won't. Maya was quiet for a moment, and I could practically hear her weighing the pros and cons. What's your real motivation here, Em? And don't say it's just professional, because we both know you have more projects than you can handle already. The question hit deeper than I'd expected. What was my motivation? It wasn't about Tyler exactly. I genuinely moved past any lingering hurt from our breakup. But there was something appealing about the idea of using the skills he'd never valued to create something beautiful for the life he'd chosen without me. Maybe I want to prove a point, I said finally. Maybe I want him to see what he never understood about what I do. Or maybe you want to show Jessica what she married. That's not fair. Isn't it, Emma? You're about to pour your heart into designing a home for the man who told you your dreams weren't practical. What happens when he loves what you've created, but doesn't know you created it? Maya's words lingered long after we ended the call. Was I setting myself up for frustration by helping Jessica create something Tyler might never fully appreciate? Or was I simply doing what I'd always done, trying to help people create homes that reflected their best selves, regardless of the personal complications involved? I looked at the consultation document I'd prepared, 12 pages of careful analysis and creative solutions that could transform Jessica and Tyler's house into something truly special. The professional part of me was proud of the work. It was thorough, insightful, and exactly what they needed to move forward successfully. The personal part of me wondered if I was making a mistake that would complicate my life in ways I couldn't predict. Before I could second-guess myself further, I attached the document to an email and typed Jessica's address in the recipient field. The subject line took several attempts to get right. Preliminary consultation, Roseville Craftsman Project. The message itself I kept brief and professional. Jessica, here are my initial thoughts based on the photos you showed me. This should give you a solid foundation for moving forward with contractors and suppliers. Feel free to reach out if you have questions about any of the recommendations. Best of luck with the project. Emma. I hovered over the send button for a full minute before clicking it. Once that email was delivered, there would be no taking it back. I'd officially become a secret consultant on my ex-boyfriend's house renovation, providing expertise he'd never thought I possessed, to help his wife create the home he'd never understood mattered so much. The response came faster than I'd expected. Less than 2 hours later, my phone chimed with a new email from Jessica. Emma, I just finished reading your consultation report, and I literally have tears in my eyes. This is everything I've been trying to articulate to contractors for months, but you've laid it out so clearly and completely. The section about restoring the original kitchen layout while incorporating modern appliances is genius, and I love your suggestions for highlighting the built-in bookcases and original crown molding. I'm forwarding this to 3 contractors tomorrow to get estimates. I can't thank you enough. This feels like the first real progress we've made since we bought the house. Jessica, reading her response, I felt that familiar satisfaction that came from solving a complex design puzzle. This was why I'd started Rodriguez Renovations, to help people create spaces that truly reflected their vision while respecting the history and character of their homes. The fact that this particular client happened to be married to my ex-boyfriend was just an unusual wrinkle in an otherwise straightforward professional relationship. Over the next week, Jessica and I exchanged several more emails as she worked with contractors to get estimates based on my recommendations. She kept me updated on their progress, sharing photos of paint samples and fixture options, asking for my input on choices between different approaches I'd suggested. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and I found myself genuinely invested in seeing the project succeed. The contractors she was working with seemed to understand historic preservation much better than the ones she'd hired previously. Two of them were companies I'd recommended specifically because of their experience with craftsman-style homes, and their estimates reflected the kind of attention to detail that would produce results worthy of the house's original craftsmanship. Tyler is actually excited about the project for the first time since we started. Jessica wrote in one email, he kept asking where I'd found such a thorough analysis of what needed to be done, and who had recommended these contractors. I told him I'd been doing research online, and found some great resources for historic home restoration. He seems impressed with how professional everything looks. I smiled reading that. Tyler was unknowingly impressed with my work, filtered through Jessica's presentation but originating entirely from the skills he'd never taken seriously when we were together. There was a sweet irony in that, though I tried not to dwell on it too much. Maya stopped by my apartment that Friday evening with Thai takeout and a bottle of wine, settling into what had become our weekly tradition of catching up on each other's lives and current projects. "So how's your secret collaboration with Tyler's wife going?" she asked, unpacking containers of pad thai and green curry. "It's going well actually. She's a great client, very clear about what she wants and receptive to suggestions. The contractors are giving her realistic timelines and budgets, and it looks like they'll be able to start work next month." "And how does it feel to be secretly designing Tyler's dream home?" I considered the question while opening the wine. "Honestly, it feels like just another project. A really interesting, challenging project with a client who appreciates good design and wants to do right by a historic property." "You're surprisingly zen about this." "I think I'm past needing Tyler's validation," I said, and realized as I spoke that it was true. Whether he ever knows I designed his house doesn't matter to me. What matters is that Jessica gets the home she's dreaming of, and that beautiful craftsman gets restored properly. Maya raised her wine glass, to professional growth and personal evolution, and to good friends who keep us honest, I added, clinking my glass against hers. The following Monday brought a surprise. I was reviewing fabric samples for another client's living room, when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. "Rodriguez Renovations, this is Emma." "Emma, hi, this is Jessica Parker. I hope it's okay that I'm calling you directly." My stomach tightened slightly. We'd been communicating exclusively through email, maintaining a professional distance that kept the situation from feeling too personal. A phone call felt like crossing into more complicated territory. "Of course, what can I help you with?" "I wanted to talk to you about something, and it felt too complicated to explain in an email. Do you have a few minutes?" "Sure, I'm between appointments right now." "Okay, so you know how I've been getting estimates from the contractors you recommended. Well, they're all pretty similar in terms of pricing and timeline, but there's one issue. They all want to meet with both homeowners before starting work. They want to walk through the house with Tyler and me together to make sure we're both on the same page about the scope of the project." I could see where this was heading, and it made me uncomfortable. That's pretty standard for major renovations. They want to avoid disagreements between spouses that could slow down the work or lead to change orders. Right, which makes perfect sense. But here's the thing. Tyler keeps asking really detailed questions about the design plans. Questions I can't answer because obviously, I didn't create them. He wants to know about structural considerations and why certain fixtures were chosen and how we determined the timeline for different phases of work. The silence stretched between us as I processed what she was telling me. Tyler was doing exactly what I would expect him to do, treating a major home renovation as a business decision that required thorough understanding of all the variables involved. The problem was that Jessica couldn't provide that understanding because the plans weren't actually hers. I see the problem, I said carefully. Emma, I know this is a lot to ask, and I completely understand if you say no, but would you consider meeting with us? Just once, to walk through the plans with Tyler and answer his questions. I could introduce you as the consulting designer I hired to develop the renovation strategy. The request hung in the air between us, loaded with implications I wasn't sure either of us had fully considered. Meeting with Tyler and Jessica together would mean revealing my involvement in their project. It would mean facing Tyler in a professional context, where I was the expert and he was the client seeking guidance. It would mean stepping out of the shadows of anonymous consultation and into the full complexity of designing a home for my ex-boyfriend and his wife. Jessica, that would be complicated. I know it would, and if you're not comfortable with it, I completely understand. But Emma, Tyler is starting to get suspicious about where all these detailed plans came from. He's not stupid, and he knows I don't have the technical knowledge to have developed this renovation strategy on my own. If I can't answer his questions, he might decide to hire a different designer to review everything, which could mean starting over from scratch. The thought of another designer taking over the project and potentially changing the carefully considered plans I'd developed was almost physically painful. I'd put real thought and creativity into solving the challenges of their house, and the solutions I'd proposed would honor both the home's historic character and their modern lifestyle needs. Can I think about it? I asked. Of course, take all the time you need. I just wanted you to know what was happening and give you the option. After we hung up, I sat in my quiet office, surrounded by fabric samples and paint chips, and sketches for other people's dream spaces, trying to decide what to do about Tyler and Jessica's house. The safe choice would be to step back now, to let Jessica handle Tyler's questions as best she could, and hope the project moved forward without my direct involvement. The complicated choice would be to meet with them, to reveal my role in their renovation plans, and to face whatever awkwardness or tension might result. But as I thought about that beautiful 1920s Craftsman, with its original hardwood floors and built-in bookcases, slowly being restored to reflect its best self while accommodating a young couple's dreams for their future, I realized the choice wasn't really about Tyler, or Jessica, or me. It was about the house, and what it deserved. Historic homes had survived decades or centuries of owners who might not have understood their value. They'd endured renovations that ignored their character, and additions that fought their original design. When someone finally came along who wanted to restore them properly, those houses deserved advocates who would fight for their integrity, regardless of personal complications. I picked up my phone and called Jessica back. "I'll meet with you and Tyler," I said when she answered. "But I have some conditions." "Anything. This has to be completely professional. I'm there as a consulting designer, period. We don't discuss personal history, and we keep the conversation focused on the renovation project. And I want to be clear that I'm doing this for the house, not as a favor to either of you. That Craftsman deserves to be restored properly, and I want to make sure that happens." "I understand completely. Thank you, Emma. Really, when did you want to schedule the meeting? Would next Saturday work? Tyler's free in the morning, and we could meet at the house, so you can see everything in person." "Saturday morning works. Text me the address, and I'll be there at 10. As I ended the call, I felt that familiar mix of nerves and excitement that came with taking on a challenging project. In less than a week, I'd be standing in Tyler's house, explaining design decisions to the man who'd once dismissed my career as a hobby, working to help him and his wife create the home they'd been struggling to envision. The situation was unprecedented in my professional experience, but the fundamentals remained the same: a historic house, with owners who wanted to restore it properly, and a designer with the skills to help them succeed. Everything else was just context. I spent the rest of the week preparing for the meeting, reviewing my consultation notes, and researching updates on the recommended contractors and suppliers. By Friday evening, I had a comprehensive folder with everything we'd need to discuss: timeline, budget considerations, material selections, and answers to the kinds of detailed questions Tyler was likely to ask. Maya came over Friday night to help me decide what to wear to the meeting. Professional but not trying too hard, she advised, going through my closet. You want to look like the successful designer you are, but not like you're dressing to impress your ex-boyfriend. I'm not dressing to impress anyone. This is a client meeting. It's a client meeting with your ex-boyfriend and his wife about the house they're going to live in for the next 20 years. There are no guidelines in any professional handbook for this situation. She was right, of course. I was venturing into uncharted territory, both personally and professionally. But I'd built Rodriguez Renovations by taking on challenging projects that other designers might avoid, and I'd succeeded because I focused on the work itself rather than the complications surrounding it. Black pants, white blouse, navy blazer, Maya decided, pulling items from my closet. Classic, professional, confident but not flashy. You realize you're taking this more seriously than I am. Someone has to. You're about to walk into the most emotionally complex client meeting of your career, and you're acting like it's just another Saturday morning consultation. Maybe I was compartmentalizing to avoid dealing with the potential awkwardness, but it felt like the healthiest approach. I was good at my job, I had valuable expertise to offer, and Tyler and Jessica needed help creating the home they wanted. Those were the facts that mattered. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly, typical May weather in Sacramento, that made me grateful for my waterproof jacket. I drove through neighborhoods I'd explored countless times while researching properties for clients, past the kind of mature trees and well-maintained gardens that made established residential areas so appealing. Tyler and Jessica's house sat on a corner lot in a quiet Roseville neighborhood, surrounded by other homes from the same era in various states of preservation and updating. Even from the street, I could see the potential. Jessica had fallen in love with original craftsman details, like exposed rafter tails and a welcoming front porch, combined with mature landscaping that provided privacy and character. I parked in the driveway behind Tyler's familiar Honda Accord and took a deep breath before gathering my materials and walking to the front door. This was it, the moment where anonymous consultation became face-to-face collaboration, where my professional expertise would be tested against the personal history that connected me to these particular clients. Jessica answered the door with a smile that looked only slightly nervous. "Emma, thank you so much for coming. Tyler's just finishing up some work emails, but he'll be right down." She led me into a living room that was clearly in transition, with furniture pushed against walls and samples of flooring and paint scattered on every surface. The bones of the house were exactly as beautiful as her photos had suggested. Original hardwood floors, a brick fireplace with period tile, and those gorgeous built-in bookcases that had so much potential once they were properly
restored.
"Tyler, Emma's here," Jessica called toward the stairs. Footsteps on the second floor. Then Tyler appeared at the top of the staircase, and for a moment we just looked at each other. He was wearing jeans and a Stanford sweatshirt I remembered from lazy Sunday mornings when we were together, and his expression was unreadable as he processed my presence in his living room. "Emma," he said, coming down the stairs with the kind of measured pace that suggested he was still figuring out how to handle this situation. Jessica mentioned you're the designer who put together the renovation plans. I am, I replied, keeping my voice professional and steady. I understand you have some questions about the proposed scope of work. I do, he said, and I caught something in his tone that might have been respect or at least professional interest. Jessica showed me your consultation report, and I have to say it's the most thorough analysis we've received from any of the designers we've worked with. Thank you. I believe in being comprehensive when it comes to historic preservation. Jessica looked between us with obvious relief that we were managing to keep the conversation focused on business. Should we start with the kitchen? That's been our biggest challenge. For the next 2 hours, we walked through every room of the house while I explained the reasoning behind each recommendation I'd made. Tyler asked intelligent questions about structural considerations, budget implications, and timeline logistics. Jessica took notes and photos of details I pointed out that supported various design decisions. It was in many ways exactly the kind of client meeting I conducted regularly, collaborative, detail-oriented, focused on helping homeowners understand their options and make informed decisions. The only unusual element was the undercurrent of personal history that none of us acknowledged but all of us felt. By noon, we'd covered every major aspect of the renovation plan, from restoring the kitchen's original layout to refinishing the hardwood floors throughout the house. Tyler seemed genuinely impressed with the scope and thoughtfulness of the proposed work, and Jessica was practically glowing with excitement about finally having clear direction for their project. "This is exactly what we needed," Tyler said as we concluded our walkthrough back in the living room. "I feel like we finally have a roadmap that makes sense both financially and practically. I'm glad I could help clarify the options," I replied. "You have a beautiful house with tremendous potential. It deserves to be restored thoughtfully." There was a moment of silence as we all seemed to realize that our business was concluded, but none of us was quite sure how to handle the transition back to whatever personal dynamic existed between the three of us. "Emma," Tyler said finally, his voice carrying a note I hadn't heard from him in over 18 months. "I owe you an apology." Jessica looked surprised, and I felt my carefully maintained professional composure waver slightly. "You don't owe me anything, Tyler." "Yes, I do." He glanced at Jessica, then back at me. "When we were together, I never really understood what you did. I thought interior design was just decorating, picking out colors and furniture. I had no idea it involved this level of technical knowledge and historical research and problem solving." The admission hung in the air between us, acknowledgement of something that had been a source of frustration throughout our relationship. "I'm good at what I do," I said simply. "You're clearly very good at what you do." This consultation report could have come from a firm with 50 employees and decades of experience. The fact that you developed it yourself, based on just photos and one conversation with Jessica, is impressive. It was validation I'd waited 3 years to hear from him, but receiving it now felt different than I'd imagined. Not triumphant or satisfying, just late, like an apology for something I'd already forgiven and moved past. "I appreciate that," I told him, "and I'm glad I could help you both figure out how to move forward with the house." Jessica walked me to the door while Tyler gathered up the materials we'd spread across the living room during our meeting. On the front porch, she turned to me with an expression of gratitude that seemed to go beyond just the renovation consultation. "Thank you for doing this," she said. "I know it couldn't have been easy." "It was fine," I said, and realized I meant it. "You're going to have a beautiful home when it's finished. I hope we can stay in touch about the project as it progresses." I considered her request. The professional part of me wanted to see the renovation through to completion, to ensure that my recommendations were implemented properly, and that the house achieved its full potential. The personal part of me wondered if it was healthier to step back now and let them proceed without further involvement from their ex-girlfriend consultant. "If you run into any issues with the contractors or need clarification about any of the design decisions, feel free to email me," I said. "I'd hate to see the project get derailed after all this planning." "Thank you, really." As I drove home through the quiet Roseville neighborhoods, I reflected on how different the morning had been from what I'd anticipated. There had been no awkwardness or tension, no emotional undercurrents that made the professional discussion difficult. Tyler had been respectful and engaged, Jessica had been appreciative and organized, and I'd been able to do what I did best: help people understand how to create the home they wanted. The validation from Tyler had been unexpected, but not particularly meaningful. His opinion of my work mattered less now than it had when we were together, partly because I'd built confidence through my own success, and partly because I'd learned that romantic partners don't have to understand every aspect of your professional life to support your ambitions. What mattered was that Tyler and Jessica now had a clear plan for restoring their house properly, and that beautiful 1920s craftsman would get the renovation it deserved. Everything else was just personal history that had been acknowledged and set aside in favor of moving forward constructively. My phone buzzed as I pulled into my apartment complex parking garage. A text from Maya: "Survived the meeting. Emergency debrief available if needed." I typed back, "Survived and thrived. It was actually fine. Call you later. Proud of you for being the bigger person." Was that what I'd been, the bigger person? Or had I simply been professional enough to separate my personal feelings from my work responsibilities? Either way, I felt good about how the morning had gone, and hopeful that Tyler and Jessica would be able to create the home they'd been dreaming of. The rest of Saturday stretched ahead of me, free and unstructured in a way that felt like a luxury after the emotional preparation I'd invested in the morning's meeting. I changed out of my professional consultation outfit and into comfortable jeans and a soft sweater, poured myself a cup of coffee, and settled onto my sofa with a stack of design magazines I'd been meaning to read. My apartment felt particularly peaceful in the afternoon light, a reminder of what I'd built for myself in the months since Tyler and I had ended. This space reflected my aesthetic sensibilities and professional skills in ways that felt completely authentic, from the carefully curated artwork on the walls to the vintage furniture I'd restored and reupholstered myself. I'd created a life that satisfied me personally and professionally, surrounded by work I loved and friends who understood my ambitions. Tyler's validation of my skills that morning had been nice to receive, but it hadn't changed anything fundamental about how I viewed myself or my career. That evening, I called Maya to debrief the morning's events, as I'd promised. "So how did it feel to be the expert in the room with Tyler?" she asked. "Professional," I said, "like any other client consultation really. Come on, there had to be some satisfaction in having him acknowledge that you're good at what you do." There was a little, but mostly it just felt overdue rather than satisfying, like getting an apology for something you'd already stopped being heard about. "That's very mature of you. Or maybe I've just moved on more completely than I realized." We talked for another hour about the renovation plans I'd developed and my predictions for how the project would progress. Maya, with her architectural background, appreciated the technical challenges involved in restoring a 1920s craftsman while updating it for contemporary living. "You did good work," she said as we wrapped up the conversation. "That house is lucky to have had your expertise, even if the situation was unconventional." "Thanks, I think they'll be happy with the results if they follow through on the plans." Sunday passed quietly, a day for laundry and meal prep and catching up on administrative tasks for Rodriguez renovations. I had 3 new client inquiries to respond to, 2 current projects that needed material selections finalized, and a magazine editor who wanted to discuss featuring one of my recent bathroom renovations in their summer issue. Business was good, better than it had ever been, and I was approaching the point where I'd need to make some decisions about expansion and hiring additional staff. Success brought its own challenges, but they were the kind of challenges I'd dreamed of facing when I'd first started my company. Monday morning brought an email from Jessica with photos of paint samples and tile options she and Tyler were considering based on our Saturday consultation. She asked for my input on several choices and updated me on which contractors they'd decided to hire for different phases of the work. "Tyler keeps saying how impressed he was with your analysis," she wrote. "He told me yesterday that he finally understands why I've been so passionate about getting the renovation right. I think seeing everything laid out so professionally helped him realize that this isn't just about aesthetics, but about respecting the history of our home while making it work for our future. I smiled reading that. Tyler had always been someone who needed to understand the logic behind decisions before he could fully support them. My consultation report had apparently provided that logical framework in a way that Jessica's Pinterest boards and magazine clippings never could. Over the following weeks, Jessica kept me updated on their progress with occasional emails and photos. The contractors had started work on schedule, beginning with the structural repairs and kitchen renovation that would form the foundation for everything else. The original hardwood floors were being professionally refinished, the built-in bookcases were being restored to their period-appropriate glory, and the kitchen was slowly being transformed back into the separate but connected space it had been designed to be. Each photo Jessica sent showed a house that was becoming more itself, shedding decades of inappropriate updates and revealing the craftsmanship that had been hidden underneath. It was exactly the kind of transformation that reminded me why I'd fallen in love with historic preservation in the first place. 6 weeks after our consultation meeting, Jessica sent an email that made me laugh out loud. "Emma, Tyler has become obsessed with craftsman architecture. He's been reading books about the arts and crafts movement, researching original fixtures online, and driving through neighborhoods looking at other houses from the same era. Yesterday he told me he wants to make sure we're doing justice to the architectural integrity of our home. I think you may have created a monster, but it's exactly the kind of monster this project needed." The transformation she described didn't surprise me. Tyler had always been capable of deep focus and genuine enthusiasm once something captured his interest. The fact that he'd never applied that focus to understanding my work during our relationship had been frustrating, but I'd learned to separate his past limitations from his current growth. People changed, priorities evolved, and sometimes it took the right circumstances to unlock appreciation for things that had been overlooked before. Tyler was discovering a passion for historic architecture and thoughtful renovation at exactly the moment when he needed that knowledge to create his dream home. The timing was perfect for him and Jessica, even if it came 3 years too late to benefit our relationship. I was genuinely happy for both of them, and for the house that was finally getting the restoration it deserved. My role in their project was largely complete, but I felt satisfied knowing that my expertise had helped them find their way to a renovation approach that honored both their vision and their home's historic character. The whole experience had taught me something valuable about professional growth and personal healing. I could use my skills to help people create beautiful spaces regardless of my personal relationship with them, and doing good work mattered more than receiving recognition for it. Tyler's eventual acknowledgement of my expertise had been validating, but it hadn't been necessary for me to feel proud of what I'd accomplished. Rodriguez renovations continued to grow throughout the summer, and by September, I'd hired 2 additional designers and moved into a larger office space. The success felt earned and sustainable, built on a foundation of skills I'd developed over years of study and practice, rather than external validation or approval. Looking back on that strange evening when Jessica had asked for my help in the bridal suite, I realized it had been exactly the kind of professional challenge that pushed me to grow. Working within the constraints of anonymity had forced me to create a consultation report that was completely self-contained and comprehensive. Managing the personal dynamics had required emotional maturity I might not have possessed even a year earlier. Most importantly, it had proven to myself that I could separate my professional judgment from personal feelings, that I could do excellent work regardless of the complications surrounding a project. Those were skills that would serve me well as Rodriguez renovations continued to expand and take on increasingly complex assignments. The last email I received from Jessica came in early October, along with photos of their completed kitchen renovation. "Emma, I wanted to share the final results with you since you made all of this possible. Tyler and I are absolutely in love with how everything turned out, and we keep finding new details to appreciate every day." The contractors said it was one of the most thoughtful renovation plans they'd worked with, and several neighbors have asked for your contact information after seeing our house. I hope it's okay that I've been recommending Rodriguez renovations to people who ask. Thank you again for everything, Jessica. The photos showed a kitchen that perfectly balanced historic character with modern functionality, exactly as I'd envisioned when I'd first seen the space during our consultation. Original details like the built-in pantry and period-appropriate hardware had been restored and highlighted, while contemporary appliances and updated lighting provided everything a modern family would need for daily living. It was beautiful work, the kind of successful restoration that made all the challenges and complexities worthwhile. Tyler and Jessica would have a lifetime to enjoy living in that space, and future owners would benefit from the thoughtful preservation of architectural details that had been in danger of being lost forever. 3 months after Tyler and Jessica's kitchen renovation was completed, I received a phone call that would change everything I thought I knew about their marriage and my role in their story. It was a Tuesday evening in late November when my phone rang with Jessica's number. I almost didn't answer, assuming it was another update about the house or perhaps a referral question from one of their neighbors. We'd maintained sporadic contact since the project ended, mostly brief exchanges about contractor recommendations or design questions that arose as they settled into their newly renovated space. "Hi Jessica," I answered, setting aside the fabric samples I'd been reviewing for a client's bedroom redesign. "How's the house treating you?" "Emma, I need to see you." Her voice was different, strained in a way I'd never heard before. "Can we meet somewhere private? I can't discuss this over the phone." The urgency in her tone immediately put me on alert. "Is everything okay? Did something happen with the renovation?" "It's not about the house." "Well, not directly. Please, Emma. I know this is weird, but I need to talk to someone who might understand, and you're the only person I can think of who knows both Tyler and me in this context." My mind raced through possibilities. Marriage troubles seemed most likely, though I couldn't imagine why Jessica would want to discuss relationship problems with Tyler's ex-girlfriend. Maybe there were issues with the contractors, or budget problems I wasn't aware of. Whatever it was, the desperation in her voice was unmistakable. "Okay," I said. "When and where?" "Tomorrow afternoon. There's a coffee shop called Grounds in downtown Sacramento on K Street. Do you know it?" I did know it. A quiet place with comfortable seating areas that would allow for private conversation. "I can be there at 3. "Jessica, are you sure you're okay?" "I will be, I hope. Thank you, Emma." Really? The next afternoon found me arriving at Grounds 15 minutes early, a habit I'd developed for client meetings that served me well in situations where I wasn't sure what to expect. I chose a corner table away from the main foot traffic, ordered a latte, and tried to prepare myself for whatever conversation was about to unfold. Jessica arrived exactly on time, but she looked different than I'd ever seen her. Gone was the polished, put-together woman I'd met at the wedding and worked with during the renovation. This Jessica had dark circles under her eyes, hair that suggested she'd been running her hands through it repeatedly, and an overall appearance of someone who hadn't been sleeping well. "Thank you for coming," she said, sliding into the chair across from me and immediately wrapping her hands around the coffee cup she'd ordered. "I know this is strange. What's going on, Jessica?" She took a deep breath, staring into her coffee as if it might provide courage for whatever she was about to say. "Tyler's having an affair." The words hit me like a physical blow, not because I still had romantic feelings for Tyler, but because of how completely they contradicted everything I thought I knew about who he was. Tyler had many flaws that I'd discovered during our 3-year relationship, but infidelity had never been one of them. He was methodical, responsible, someone who color-coded his calendar and returned library books 2 days early. The idea of him maintaining a secret relationship seemed fundamentally inconsistent with his personality. "Are you sure?" I asked carefully. "I'm sure." Jessica's voice was flat, matter-of-fact in the way that suggested she'd moved past the initial shock and into the practical phase of dealing with reality. "I found text messages, receipts from restaurants we've never been to together, charges on his credit card for a hotel room last month when he was supposedly at a work conference in San Francisco." I sat quietly processing this information and trying to understand why Jessica had chosen to share it with me. We barely knew each other outside the context of her house renovation. Our entire relationship had been built around my professional expertise and her need for design guidance, not personal intimacy or friendship. "Jessica, I'm sorry you're going through this, but I'm not sure why you wanted to tell me." Because you're the only person who knows Tyler the way I'm seeing him now, she said, looking up at me for the first time since she'd started talking. Everyone else in my life only knows the version of Tyler from our wedding, the charming guy who seems so devoted and thoughtful. They'd never believe he was capable of cheating, but you lived with him for 3 years. You know what he's really like. The request implicit in her statement made me deeply uncomfortable. Jessica seemed to want me to validate her perception of Tyler as someone capable of infidelity, to provide evidence from our past relationship that would support her current suspicions. But that wasn't a role I was willing or qualified to fill. Jessica, I can't tell you what Tyler is or isn't capable of doing in your marriage. People change, circumstances change, and honestly, the Tyler I dated might not be the same person you married, but he is the same person, she insisted. That's what I've been realizing over the past few weeks as I've been thinking about all of this. The Tyler I married is exactly the Tyler you dated. I just didn't want to see the parts of him that weren't convenient for my fantasy of what our relationship should be. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through what appeared to be screenshots of text messages. Look at this. This is from last week when I asked him about his day. She showed me a brief exchange where Tyler had given monosyllabic responses to Jessica's questions about his work schedule and evening plans. The conversation was polite but distant, lacking any warmth or genuine engagement. Now look at this, she said, swiping to a different conversation. This is him texting someone named Melissa about meeting for lunch. The tone in these messages was completely different, playful, flirtatious, full of the kind of attention and interest that had been absent from his conversation with Jessica. Even without seeing Melissa's responses, it was clear that Tyler was investing emotional energy in this relationship that he wasn't bringing to his marriage. I confronted him about it yesterday, Jessica continued. He admitted to the affair, but he said it was my fault because I've been so focused on the house renovation that I haven't been paying attention to him. He said Melissa understands his needs in ways that I don't. The familiar pattern in Tyler's explanation made my stomach turn. During our relationship, whenever I'd brought up concerns about his lack of support for my career goals, he'd found ways to turn the conversation back to my shortcomings. If I was upset that he'd dismissed my design work as a hobby, it was because I was too sensitive. If I felt hurt that he'd never attended any of my business networking events, it was because I was asking too much of him. That sounds like Tyler, I said, then immediately regretted the admission. I didn't want to be drawn into analyzing my ex-boyfriend's behavior patterns with his current wife. It does, doesn't it? And that's when I realized that I'd been making the same mistake with Tyler that you probably made. I kept trying to get him to be someone he isn't instead of accepting who he actually is. Jessica's analysis was uncomfortably perceptive. I had spent significant portions of our relationship trying to convince Tyler to value things that mattered to me, from my professional ambitions to my appreciation for architectural details and historic preservation. I'd interpreted his lack of interest as something that could be overcome with patience and better communication, rather than recognizing it as a fundamental incompatibility. What are you planning to do? I asked, redirecting the conversation away from our shared experiences with Tyler. I don't know yet. Part of me wants to fight for the marriage, to go to counseling and try to work through this, but another part of me thinks maybe Tyler did us both a favor by showing me who he really is before we had kids or got more financially entangled. Jessica's phone buzzed with a text message, and she glanced at it before setting the phone face down on the table with obvious frustration. That's him now, asking when I'll be home for dinner, like nothing has changed, like we didn't have a conversation yesterday where he admitted to cheating on me. The casualness Tyler was apparently maintaining in the face of such a significant revelation was consistent with how he'd handled conflict during our relationship. He had an ability to compartmentalize problems in ways that allowed him to function normally while avoiding the emotional weight of difficult situations. Jessica, I think you should talk to a counselor or a therapist about this, someone who's trained to help people work through marital problems. I'm not qualified to give you advice about your relationship. I know you're not, but Emma, can I ask you something? When Tyler broke up with you, did you feel relieved underneath the hurt? The question caught me off guard with its directness and insight. I'd never admitted to anyone, not even Maya, that mixed in with the pain of Tyler's rejection had been a small sense of freedom. Relief that I no longer had to justify my career choices or explain why certain things mattered to me. relief that I could pursue my professional goals without having to navigate his skepticism or indifference. That's a complicated question, I said carefully. It's okay, you don't have to answer. But I think I'm starting to understand why Tyler was attracted to both of us, and why neither relationship worked out the way he expected. What do you mean? Jessica stirred her coffee thoughtfully before responding. Tyler likes the idea of successful, independent women, but he doesn't actually want the reality of being in a relationship with one. He wants someone who appears ambitious and accomplished from the outside, but who will prioritize his needs and preferences when it comes to day-to-day life. Her observation was astute enough to make me uncomfortable. I'd never articulated it quite that way, but there had been a pattern in Tyler's behavior that suggested he was attracted to strong women in theory, while struggling to support them in practice. With you, he got someone who was building a career in a field he didn't understand or value. With me, he got someone who was focused on creating a home and lifestyle that required more attention to detail than he wanted to invest. In both cases, he ended up feeling like we were asking too much of him. And now with Melissa, from what I can tell, Melissa is someone who thinks Tyler is fascinating exactly as he is. She's not trying to change him or push him to grow in areas where he's not interested in growing. She's giving him the uncomplicated admiration he wants without expecting anything in return that feels like work to him. Jessica's analysis was painful in its accuracy. She'd identified the fundamental issue that had undermined both of Tyler's serious relationships: his desire to be with someone impressive without having to do the work of truly understanding and supporting what made them impressive. The irony is that Tyler actually did grow during our renovation project. Jessica continued, having your expertise to guide the process helped him develop a genuine appreciation for historic architecture and thoughtful design. But that growth only happened because it was presented in a framework he could understand, with clear logical explanations and professional documentation. She paused, taking a sip of her coffee before continuing. I keep wondering if Tyler might have been able to appreciate your work earlier if someone had explained it to him the way you explained our house renovation. But that shouldn't have been your job, should it? Partners should be curious enough about each other's passions to try to understand them without needing a formal presentation. The conversation was venturing into territory that felt too intimate and psychologically complex for what should have been a brief coffee meeting between acquaintances. Jessica was processing her marriage problems by analyzing Tyler's relationship patterns, and while her insights were remarkably perceptive, I wasn't comfortable serving as her sounding board for this level of personal revelation. Jessica, I think you should really consider talking to a professional counselor about all of this. These are important insights, but working through them with Tyler is going to require more support than I can provide. You're right, of course. I guess I just needed to talk to someone who would understand what I'm figuring out about Tyler without thinking I'm crazy or being unfair to him. You're not crazy, and you're not being unfair, but you are going through something really difficult that deserves proper support. Jessica nodded, looking more composed than she had when she'd first arrived. Thank you for listening, Emma. And thank you for not making me feel stupid for marrying someone you'd already figured out wasn't capable of the kind of partnership I wanted. I never figured Tyler out completely, I admitted. I just eventually realized we weren't compatible in some fundamental ways. That doesn't mean he's a bad person, just that he might not be the right person for either of us. Can I ask you one more thing? Do you think Tyler realizes what he's doing, or is he genuinely confused about why his relationships don't work out? I considered the question, thinking back on conversations Tyler and I had during our breakup, and the glimpses I'd seen of his self-awareness during the house renovation consultation. I think Tyler understands his own preferences and needs pretty clearly. What he struggles with is understanding that other people's preferences and needs are equally valid, even when they're different from his. He's not malicious, but he's limited in his ability to see situations from perspectives other than his own. That actually helps me understand a lot, Jessica said. I've been trying to figure out whether I should be angry at him for deliberately deceiving me, or sorry for him because he doesn't know how to have a healthy relationship. Maybe you can be both, or neither. What matters more is figuring out what you want for your own life going forward. Jessica gathered her purse and prepared to leave, looking more resolved than she had at any point during our conversation. "I'm going to call a counselor tomorrow," she said. "And I'm going to start thinking seriously about whether I want to try to save this marriage or accept that Tyler and I want different things from a relationship." That sounds like a healthy approach. Emma, I know this was a strange conversation, but it helped me more than you probably realize. You've been nothing but professional and kind throughout this whole weird situation, from the wedding to the house renovation to today. I don't know many people who would have handled it with as much grace. The compliment touched me more than I'd expected. The past 9 months had indeed been unusual, requiring me to navigate personal and professional boundaries I'd never encountered before. But I'd approached each situation by focusing on what seemed most constructive and helpful rather than what might have been emotionally satisfying. I hope everything works out for you, Jessica. You deserve to be with someone who appreciates what you bring to a relationship. So do you, she said. I hope Tyler's inability to see what he had doesn't make you doubt your worth. After Jessica left, I remained at the coffee shop for another hour, processing our conversation and its implications. Learning about Tyler's affair had been shocking, but Jessica's analysis of his relationship patterns had been even more revealing. She'd articulated dynamics I'd sensed but never fully understood during my own time with Tyler. The realization that Tyler was attracted to accomplished women but struggled to support them in practice explained so much about our relationship's underlying tension. I'd spent 3 years trying to get him to understand and value my professional aspirations, never recognizing that his lack of support wasn't about my ability to communicate effectively or his capacity to learn. It was about fundamental differences in how we understood partnership and mutual growth. Jessica's insights also helped me understand why Tyler's acknowledgement of my design skills during the house consultation had felt meaningful but not transformative. He could appreciate my expertise when it was presented in a professional context that served his immediate needs, but that didn't necessarily translate to understanding why his dismissal of my career had been hurtful during our relationship. The conversation had also highlighted how much I'd grown since Tyler and I broke up. 18 months ago, I would have been devastated to learn about his affair, interpreting it as evidence that he'd found something with someone else that I hadn't been able to provide. Now my primary emotion was sympathy for Jessica, who was discovering the same fundamental incompatibilities I'd experienced, and a mild sense of vindication that the problems in our relationship hadn't been entirely my fault. Driving home through the evening traffic, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me to this point. What had started as an awkward wedding invitation had evolved into a professional project that showcased my skills, and then into an unexpected friendship with a woman who was married to my ex-boyfriend. Each phase had required me to grow in different ways, professionally and personally. The house renovation had proven to myself and others that I could separate personal feelings from professional judgment, delivering excellent work regardless of the emotional complexity surrounding a project. Today's conversation with Jessica had demonstrated that I could offer support and perspective without getting drawn into drama or taking sides in someone else's relationship problems. Most importantly, the entire experience had confirmed that I'd made the right choice in focusing on building Rodriguez renovations rather than trying to make Tyler understand and value my work. Success and satisfaction had come from developing my skills and finding clients who appreciated what I offered, not from convincing someone who wasn't interested to change their perspective. That evening, I called Maya to debrief the afternoon's unexpected developments. "So Tyler's having an affair," she said after I'd filled her in on Jessica's revelations. "I can't say I'm entirely surprised. Really, because I was shocked. Cheating never seemed like something Tyler would do. Cheating, maybe not. But Tyler always struck me as someone who would find ways to get his needs met without considering how it affected other people. An affair is just one version of that pattern." Maya's observation made sense. Tyler's tendency to prioritize his own comfort and preferences had manifested in different ways throughout our relationship, from dismissing my career goals to avoiding social events that didn't interest him. An affair was perhaps just a more extreme version of that same self-centered approach to problem solving. What did you think of Jessica's analysis of Tyler's relationship patterns? Honestly, I thought it was pretty insightful. And it explained a lot about why you and Tyler never quite worked, even though you seemed compatible on the surface. Do you think I should have seen those patterns earlier? Emma, you can't blame yourself for not being a relationship psychologist at 25. Most of us have to learn about compatibility through experience, including the experience of relationships that don't work out. I know you're right. It's just strange to have someone else articulate things about my own past relationship that I never fully understood at the time. That's the gift of perspective and distance. Plus, Jessica has the advantage of seeing Tyler's behavior patterns repeated with a different person, which makes the patterns more obvious. We talked for another 45 minutes about relationships, personal growth, and the unexpected ways life sometimes provided closure for experiences we thought we'd already processed completely. Maya's perspective helped me put the day's conversation in context and reinforced my sense that I'd handled the situation appropriately. Over the following weeks, Jessica and I exchanged a few brief emails about practical matters related to the house renovation and contractor warranties, but we didn't discuss her marriage or Tyler's affair again. I assumed she was working through those issues with professional help, as she'd indicated she would, and I respected her privacy by not asking for updates. Rodriguez renovations continued to thrive, with December bringing several new client inquiries and a feature article in a regional home design magazine that significantly increased my visibility in the Sacramento market. I was busier than I'd ever been, managing multiple projects while also handling the administrative aspects of running a growing business. The success felt earned and sustainable in ways that were deeply satisfying. I'd built something meaningful through my own skills and effort, created work that improved people's lives by helping them create homes that reflected their values and dreams. The validation came from satisfied clients, successful projects, and the respect of contractors and other professionals in my field, rather than from romantic partners or family members who might or might not understand what I did. In mid-December, I received an unexpected email from Tyler himself. The subject line read, "Thank you and apology," and my first instinct was to delete it without reading. But curiosity won out, and I opened the message to find a brief but thoughtful note. "Emma, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted to thank you for the work you did on our house, and apologize for never understanding what you did professionally when we were together. Jessica and I are getting divorced, but that has nothing to do with you or the renovation project. Your design work gave us a beautiful home, and I hope whoever ends up living there appreciates the thoughtfulness you put into preserving its character. I'm sorry it took me so long to realize how talented and knowledgeable you are. I hope your business continues to succeed. Tyler." The email was vintage Tyler, practical, emotionally restrained, focused on concrete facts rather than feelings. But it was also more self-aware than communications I'd received from him in the past, suggesting that the end of his marriage had prompted some genuine reflection on his part. I read the message twice, then closed my laptop without responding. Tyler's apology was appreciated but not necessary for my peace of mind, and his thanks for my professional work felt appropriate but not particularly meaningful. What mattered was that he and Jessica were both moving toward situations that might allow them to find more compatible partners, and that their house had been renovated properly, regardless of what happened to their relationship. The divorce didn't surprise me, given what Jessica had shared about Tyler's affair and her growing awareness of their fundamental incompatibilities. But I felt genuine sadness that two people who'd seemed so hopeful at their wedding were discovering that love and good intentions weren't enough to overcome basic differences in values and communication styles. A week later, I received another email from Jessica, this one longer and more personal than Tyler's brief note. "Emma, I wanted to let you know that Tyler and I have decided to divorce. It's been a difficult few months, but I think we're both heading towards situations that will make us happier in the long run. I'm keeping the house, which feels right since I'm the one who really understood what it could become. I'll be living there alone for the first time in my adult life, but I'm looking forward to making it truly mine. Our renovation plans created exactly the home I dreamed of, and now I'll get to enjoy it without having to compromise with someone who never fully appreciated what we built together. Thank you for everything you did to help make this house a reality. I hope we can stay in touch occasionally. Best wishes, Jessica. Jessica's email felt like a proper conclusion to the strange year-long journey we'd shared. She'd gotten the house she wanted, learned important things about herself and her needs in a relationship, and was moving forward with clarity about what she wanted from life. Tyler was presumably free to find someone who would appreciate him exactly as he was, without expecting him to grow in areas where growth felt like work to him. And I had gained valuable experience in managing complex professional situations, proven my ability to separate personal feelings from business decisions, and contributed to the preservation of a beautiful historic home that would provide shelter and joy for whoever lived there next. The whole experience had been messy and complicated, and occasionally uncomfortable, but it had also been oddly perfect in its outcomes. Everyone involved had learned something important, gotten something they needed, or moved closer to understanding what they actually wanted from their lives. As I prepared for the holidays and looked ahead to what promised to be Rodriguez Renovation's most successful year yet, I felt grateful for the unexpected paths that had led me to this point. Sometimes, the most challenging professional and personal situations turned out to be the ones that taught the most valuable lessons and created the most opportunities for growth. Tyler and Jessica's house stood as a testament to what could be accomplished when someone with expertise was allowed to do their work properly, supported by clients who understood the value of that expertise, even if they arrived at that understanding through complicated circumstances. It was a beautiful example of historic preservation done right, and regardless of who lived there in the future, it would continue to honor both its architectural heritage and the dreams of the people who had loved it enough to restore it thoughtfully. That felt like legacy enough for any project, no matter how unusual the story behind its creation had been. The new year would bring fresh challenges and opportunities, new clients with their own dreams for creating homes that reflected their values and aspirations, but I'd enter those projects with increased confidence in my ability to navigate whatever complexity surrounded them, focused on doing excellent work rather than worrying about recognition or validation from people whose approval wasn't necessary for my success. Sometimes, the most important lessons came disguised as awkward wedding invitations and desperate requests for help from people who had no reason to trust you, except that you possessed exactly the skills they needed. Sometimes, professional growth required stepping into situations that felt personally uncomfortable but offered opportunities to prove your capabilities in new ways. Most importantly, sometimes, the best vindication wasn't dramatic or public or immediately satisfying. Sometimes, it was quiet and private and only fully appreciated in retrospect. The knowledge that you'd done good work under difficult circumstances helped people create something beautiful and emerge stronger and more confident than you'd been before. As I looked at the photos Jessica had sent of her completed kitchen one last time before filing them away with the rest of the project documentation, I felt that quiet satisfaction that came from problems solved and dreams realized. The house was beautiful, the clients were better off for having worked with me, and I'd proven to myself that I could handle whatever professional challenges came my way. Everything else was just the complicated, messy, ultimately irrelevant context that surrounded good work well done. 18 months after Tyler and Jessica's divorce was finalized, I found myself standing in the Sacramento Convention Center at the annual Northern California Historic Preservation Awards ceremony, wearing a black cocktail dress and holding a crystal plaque that read Outstanding Residential Restoration, Rodriguez Renovations. The project being honored was a Victorian mansion in the fabulous 40s neighborhood, but as I looked out at the crowd of architects, contractors, and preservation enthusiasts applauding, my mind drifted to a different house entirely. Tyler and Jessica's Craftsman bungalow had never won any awards, it hadn't been featured in national magazines or attracted attention from preservation societies, but it had been the project that taught me the most about my own capabilities, both professional and personal. Standing there, accepting recognition for work that built on lessons learned during that complicated consultation, I realized how profoundly that experience had shaped the trajectory of my career. Rodriguez Renovations now employed 6 people and operate out of a restored 1930s office building in Midtown Sacramento. We specialized in historic residential projects throughout Northern California, with a waiting list that extended 8 months into the future. The business had grown beyond anything I'd imagined when I'd first hung out my shingle in that tiny apartment office, but the growth felt organic and purposeful rather than overwhelming. Maya joined me at the reception following the award ceremony, raising her wineglass in a toast to what she called my professional vindication tour of the greater Sacramento area. "Remember when you were worried about taking on Tyler's house project because it might be too complicated?" she asked, grinning at the memory. I was right to be worried. It was incredibly complicated, but sometimes the most difficult projects teach you the most valuable skills, such as how to separate personal feelings from professional judgment, how to deliver excellent work regardless of who the client is or what history you share with them, how to maintain boundaries while still being genuinely helpful. The skills I'd developed during that unusual consultation had served me well in subsequent projects. Historic preservation often involved navigating family dynamics, neighborhood politics, and competing visions for how a building should be restored. Learning to focus on the needs of the structure itself while managing human complexity had become one of my greatest professional strengths. "Have you heard anything about Tyler and Jessica lately?" Maya asked. "Actually, yes. Jessica sent me an email last month with some news." I'd been surprised to receive the message, since our communication had dwindled to annual holiday greetings and occasional professional referrals, but Jessica had written to let me know that she was engaged to someone new, a landscape architect named Michael, who specialized in native California plants and sustainable garden design. She said they met at a historic preservation conference. I told Maya. Apparently, he's as passionate about restoring original garden layouts as she is about preserving interior architectural details. They're planning to renovate a 1920s Spanish colonial in Davis together. That sounds perfect for her. It does. She mentioned that Michael actually read my entire consultation report about her old house because he wanted to understand her design philosophy. Can you imagine Tyler doing something like that? Maya laughed. Tyler reading a 12-page design analysis to better understand his partner's interests. That would have required a level of curiosity about other people's expertise that I never saw evidence of. The comparison highlighted how much Jessica had learned from her marriage to Tyler. Her new relationship seemed built on genuine shared interests and mutual respect for each other's professional knowledge, exactly the kind of partnership she'd been trying to create with Tyler without realizing he wasn't capable of that level of intellectual and emotional reciprocity. "What about Tyler? Any updates on his situation?" Jessica mentioned that he's dating someone new too, a marketing coordinator at his company who apparently thinks his travel schedule and work priorities are exactly what she's looking for in a relationship, someone who doesn't expect him to grow or change in areas where growth feels like work to him. Exactly. Which is probably the healthiest outcome for everyone involved. Tyler gets to be appreciated for who he actually is, instead of being pushed to become someone different, and his new girlfriend gets a partner whose limitations align with her expectations. It was a more generous perspective on Tyler's situation than I might have managed a few years earlier. Time and professional success had given me the emotional distance to recognize that Tyler's inability to be the kind of partner Jessica and I had needed didn't make him a fundamentally bad person. It just made him wrong for us, while potentially being exactly right for someone with different needs and expectations. The awards reception continued around us, conversations flowing between tables of people who shared a passion for preserving California's architectural heritage. I found myself in several discussions about upcoming projects, potential collaborations, and the challenges of balancing historic preservation with modern sustainability requirements. These were my people, professionals who understood why original crown molding mattered and why properly restored hardwood floors were worth the extra expense. Near the end of the evening, I was approached by a woman I didn't recognize, someone in her 50s with silver hair and the kind of confident bearing that suggested significant experience in her field. "Miss Rodriguez, I'm Patricia Hendricks from the California Preservation Foundation. I've been following your work for some time and I wanted to discuss a potential opportunity with you." Patricia explained that the foundation was launching a new initiative to document and preserve historically significant homes throughout Northern California before they were lost to development pressure or inappropriate renovation. They were looking for designers with proven expertise in residential historic preservation to serve as regional consultants, working with homeowners to develop preservation plans and connecting them with qualified contractors and craftspeople. "Your portfolio demonstrates exactly the kind of thoughtful approach we're looking for," she said. "Projects that honor original architectural intent while creating functional modern living spaces. Would you be interested in learning more about this initiative?" The opportunity she described was exactly the kind of work that excited me most, helping preserve California's residential architectural heritage while supporting individual homeowners who wanted to restore their properties responsibly. It would be challenging work that required all the skills I'd developed over the past several years, from technical knowledge about period construction methods to the interpersonal abilities needed to navigate complex family and financial situations. "I'm very interested," I told her. "When can we discuss the details?" "I'll email you next week with more information about the program structure and application process." I should mention that this would involve some travel throughout Northern California and occasional collaboration with other preservation professionals, so it would need to fit with your current business operations. Rodriguez Renovations is at a point where my team can handle most of our ongoing projects independently. Taking on consulting work that advances the broader field of historic preservation sounds like a perfect next step. Patricia handed me her business card and promised to follow up soon with more details. As she walked away, I realized that this conversation might represent the beginning of the next phase of my career, an opportunity to expand my impact beyond individual client projects to influencing preservation practices throughout the region. Maya had witnessed the conversation from nearby, and she joined me as Patricia disappeared into the crowd. "That sounded promising," she said. "It could be amazing." The chance to work on preservation projects throughout Northern California to help set standards for how historic homes should be restored, to build relationships with other professionals who share these values. And it's all happening because people in the field recognize the quality of your work and trust your judgment, which brings us full circle to Tyler's house in a strange way. That project forced me to develop skills I didn't even know I needed, working with clients who had complicated dynamics, managing projects where personal and professional boundaries were blurred, focusing on the needs of the building even when the human situation was messy. Do you think Tyler ever realized that his ex-girlfriend designed his dream home? I'd wondered about this occasionally, especially after receiving his brief thank you email acknowledging my professional skills. Tyler was observant enough to have noticed the timing of Jessica's sudden access to detailed renovation plans, particularly if he'd thought about how quickly she'd gone from struggling with previous designers to having a comprehensive restoration strategy. I think he might have suspected, but I don't think it mattered to him one way or another. By the time he realized what good design work looked like, he was too focused on his own problems to spend much time thinking about where Jessica's solutions had come from. And that's probably for the best. The whole situation was complicated enough without adding another layer of awkwardness. Maya was right. The cleanest outcome had been for my professional contribution to remain largely invisible, appreciated by Jessica and ultimately beneficial to Tyler without requiring him to grapple with the implications of having been helped by someone whose expertise he'd previously dismissed. The following week brought Patricia's promised email with detailed information about the California Preservation Foundation's new consulting program. The scope was even more ambitious than I'd initially understood. Regional consultants would work with homeowners, local governments, and nonprofit organizations to develop comprehensive preservation strategies for historically significant properties throughout Northern California. The program would involve site visits, documentation projects, educational workshops, and collaboration with other preservation professionals to establish best practices for different types of historic properties. Consultants would have access to research resources, technical support, and ongoing professional development opportunities that would expand their expertise in specialized areas of historic preservation. Reading through the program description, I felt the same excitement I'd experienced when first discovering my passion for historic architecture during graduate school. This was work that mattered, that would help preserve California's architectural heritage for future generations while supporting current homeowners who wanted to be responsible stewards of historic properties. The application process was rigorous, requiring a detailed portfolio of completed projects, references from clients and collaborating professionals, and a written statement about my preservation philosophy and approach to working with diverse stakeholders. But I felt confident that my experience over the past several years had prepared me well for exactly this kind of opportunity. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing my application materials, reviewing photographs and documentation from dozens of projects Rodriguez Renovations had completed since our founding. Looking at the portfolio chronologically, I could see how my approach to historic preservation had evolved and matured, becoming more sophisticated in both technical and interpersonal aspects. The earliest projects showed competent work but relatively straightforward preservation challenges. More recent projects demonstrated increasing complexity in both design solutions and client management, reflecting skills I'd developed through experience with difficult situations like Tyler and Jessica's house renovation. Including that project in my portfolio required some careful consideration. The work itself was excellent, representing exactly the kind of thoughtful historic preservation the foundation program was designed to promote. But the personal complications surrounding the project made me hesitant to highlight it in a professional application. Ultimately, I decided to include the craftsman renovation with a straightforward description that focused on the technical challenges and design solutions without mentioning the unusual circumstances that had led to my involvement. The project spoke for itself in terms of quality and approach, and the personal context was irrelevant to its value as an example of my preservation work. Maya reviewed my application materials before I submitted them, offering feedback on both content and presentation. "This portfolio is incredibly strong," she said, looking through photographs of completed projects. "You've documented a clear progression from competent restoration work to sophisticated preservation projects that balance multiple competing priorities. Do you think including Tyler's house was the right choice?" "Absolutely, it's some of your best work, and the results speak for themselves. The fact that the client's situation was unusual doesn't diminish the quality of the design solutions or the success of the finished project. I keep thinking about how that consultation taught me skills I didn't even know I needed. Working with clients who had conflicting perspectives, managing a project where I couldn't be directly involved in implementation, focusing on the building's needs even when the human dynamics were complicated. Those are exactly the kinds of skills that will be valuable in a regional consulting program. You'll be working with all kinds of property owners in different situations, and many of them will have complicated family dynamics or financial pressures or competing visions for their buildings." Maya was right. The preservation consulting work would require all the interpersonal skills I'd developed through challenging projects like Tyler's house, combined with the technical expertise I'd built through years of studying period construction methods and architectural history. I submitted my application on a Friday afternoon in late spring, then tried to focus on current Rodriguez renovations projects while waiting for a response from the foundation. The waiting was made easier by a particularly interesting Victorian restoration in the fabulous 40s that required extensive research into original paint colors and wallpaper patterns. The kind of detective work that reminded me why I'd fallen in love with historic preservation in the first place. 6 weeks later, Patricia called to let me know that I'd been accepted into the consulting program and invited to attend a 3-day training workshop in San Francisco the following month. "Your application was outstanding," she said. "The selection committee was particularly impressed with the range and quality of your completed projects, and your preservation philosophy statement demonstrated exactly the kind of thoughtful approach we're looking for in regional consultants. I'm thrilled to be selected. This feels like the perfect next step for both my professional development and my contribution to historic preservation in California." The training workshop will cover program protocols, documentation standards, and collaboration procedures with other consultants and foundation staff. You'll also have opportunities to network with preservation professionals from throughout the state and learn about resources available through our research library and technical support services. The workshop exceeded my expectations in every way. I spent 3 days learning advanced documentation techniques, exploring case studies of successful preservation projects, and building relationships with other consultants who brought expertise in different aspects of historic architecture and preservation practice. One of the most valuable sessions focused on managing complex stakeholder situations where property owners, family members, local government officials, and community groups might have competing visions for how a historic building should be preserved or adapted. The scenarios we discussed were remarkably similar to challenges I'd navigated in my own practice, confirming that the skills I'd developed through experience were directly applicable to the regional consulting work. During breaks between sessions, I found myself in conversations with other consultants about the personal satisfactions and professional challenges of preservation work. Many of them shared stories about projects that had taught them unexpected lessons or pushed them to develop new skills, often through situations that had initially seemed impossibly complicated. "The most difficult projects are usually the ones that teach you the most," said Robert, a structural engineer from San Jose who specialized in seismic retrofitting of historic buildings. "You develop problem-solving abilities and client management skills that you never would have learned from straightforward assignments." His observation resonated deeply with my own experience. Tyler's house had been challenging in ways I couldn't have anticipated, but those challenges had forced me to grow professionally in areas that were now proving invaluable in more complex preservation projects. On the final day of the workshop, participants presented case studies from their own practices that demonstrated different approaches to common preservation challenges. I chose to present Tyler and Jessica's Craftsman renovation, focusing on the technical aspects of restoring original layouts while incorporating modern functionality. The response from other consultants and foundation staff was enthusiastically positive. Several people commented on the thoroughness of my analysis and the creativity of solutions I'd developed for integrating period-appropriate fixtures with contemporary appliances and lighting. "This is exactly the kind of work that preserves architectural integrity while creating livable modern homes," Patricia said during the discussion following my presentation. "Projects like this demonstrate that historic preservation doesn't require sacrificing comfort or functionality." After the workshop, I returned to Sacramento with renewed energy for my work and excited anticipation about the preservation consulting opportunities that would soon be coming my way. The foundation would begin referring potential projects within a few weeks, and I was eager to apply what I'd learned during the training to help more California homeowners become effective stewards of historic properties. The first consulting referral came sooner than expected. A couple in Nevada City had inherited a 1890s Queen Anne Victorian that needed significant restoration work, but they were overwhelmed by the scope of the project and unsure how to proceed without damaging the building's historic character. Driving through the Sierra foothills to meet with them, I reflected on how different my approach to this consultation would be compared to my anonymous advice for Tyler and Jessica several years earlier. I now had the backing of the California Preservation Foundation, access to extensive research resources, and connections with specialists throughout the region who could provide support for complex technical challenges. More importantly, I had confidence in my ability to navigate whatever personal or practical complications might surround the project. Historic buildings often carried emotional weight for their owners, representing family history, financial stress, or conflicting visions for the future. Learning to honor those feelings while focusing on what the building itself needed had become one of my core professional strengths. The Nevada City consultation went beautifully. The property owners were genuinely committed to preserving their Victorian's character while making it comfortable for year-round living, and they were receptive to my suggestions about prioritizing structural issues before addressing cosmetic improvements. We spent 3 hours walking through the house together, with me explaining the significance of various architectural details and suggesting approaches for restoration that would honor the building's 1890s origins while accommodating contemporary needs for insulation, updated electrical systems, and modern kitchen functionality. By the end of our meeting, they had a clear understanding of the project's scope, realistic timelines for different phases of work, and contact information for contractors and craftspeople who specialized in Victorian restoration. Most importantly, they felt confident about their ability to make decisions that would preserve their house's historic integrity while creating a home that would serve their family well. Driving back to Sacramento as the sun set behind the coastal mountains, I felt the deep satisfaction that came from helping people develop thoughtful approaches to caring for irreplaceable historic buildings. This was work that mattered, that made a real difference in preserving California's architectural heritage while supporting individual families who wanted to be responsible stewards of the properties they'd inherited or chosen to purchase. Over the following months, foundation referrals brought me to historic properties throughout Northern California: a Spanish colonial revival in San Luis Obispo, a craftsman bungalow in Eureka, a Victorian farmhouse in the Napa Valley, and dozens of other buildings that needed knowledgeable guidance to navigate preservation challenges successfully. Each project was unique, with its own technical complications and human dynamics, but I found myself drawing repeatedly on lessons learned during that first complicated consultation with Tyler and Jessica. The ability to focus on a building's needs while managing complex interpersonal situations had become fundamental to my approach to historic preservation consulting. 6 months into my work with the foundation, I received an unexpected email that brought my professional journey full circle in the most surprising way possible. The message was from David, the landscape architect Jessica had mentioned in her engagement announcement. "Miss Rodriguez, I hope you don't mind my reaching out directly. Jessica gave me your contact information because we have a situation where we could use your expertise. We're restoring a 1925 Mediterranean revival house in Palo Alto, and we've encountered some complications with the interior restoration that require someone with your specific knowledge of period architecture and historic preservation practices." David went on to explain that they were working with a general contractor who was excellent with structural and mechanical updates but lacked experience with period-appropriate interior restoration. They needed a consultant who could develop detailed specifications for recreating missing architectural details, selecting appropriate fixtures and materials, and ensuring that modern updates didn't compromise the house's historic character. "Jessica speaks very highly of your work and your ability to develop comprehensive restoration plans that respect both historic integrity and contemporary functionality. She thought you might be willing to consult on our project given your expertise with Mediterranean revival architecture." Reading his email, I smiled at the unexpected symmetry of being asked to help Jessica with another historic house restoration, this time in partnership with someone who clearly appreciated her knowledge and shared her passion for architectural preservation. I replied that I'd be happy to discuss their project and suggested a phone consultation to better understand their needs and timeline. David responded immediately with gratitude and detailed information about the house and the restoration challenges they were facing. The consultation call, held a few days later with both David and Jessica participating, was a pleasure from beginning to end. They'd clearly done their research about the house's history and original configuration, and they had thoughtful questions about how to approach restoration decisions that would honor the architect's original vision while accommodating their contemporary lifestyle needs. Jessica sounded happier and more confident than I'd ever heard her, and David's questions demonstrated both technical knowledge and genuine respect for Jessica's preservation instincts. Their collaborative approach to the project was everything. Tyler and Jessica's house renovation hadn't been two partners working together with shared values and mutual appreciation for each other's expertise. "We want to get this right," Jessica said near the end of our call. "This house has been neglected for decades and it deserves to be restored by people who understand what makes Mediterranean revival architecture special. I'd be honored to help you develop a comprehensive restoration plan," I told them. "Based on what you've described, this sounds like exactly the kind of project that demonstrates how historic preservation can create beautiful functional homes for contemporary families." We scheduled an on-site consultation for the following month, and I found myself looking forward to working with Jessica again under much healthier circumstances. Her new relationship seemed to provide the kind of partnership she'd been seeking when she'd married Tyler, and David's background in landscape architecture would complement my interior restoration expertise perfectly. The Palo Alto consultation was everything I'd hoped it would be. Jessica and David had prepared extensively with historical research about the house's original architect, photographs of comparable properties from the same period, and thoughtful questions about how to balance preservation priorities with practical needs for contemporary living. Walking through the house with them, I could see how well suited they were as partners for both the restoration project and their relationship more generally. They listened carefully to each other's observations, built on each other's ideas, and approached disagreements with curiosity rather than defensiveness. This is how renovation partnerships should work, I found myself thinking as we discussed options for restoring the house's original dining room configuration while creating better flow between indoor and outdoor living spaces. The restoration plan I developed for Jessica and David was some of the most satisfying work I'd done in months. The house had tremendous potential, and they had both the commitment and resources needed to restore it properly. More importantly, they had the kind of collaborative relationship that would allow them to navigate the inevitable challenges and decisions that any major restoration project involves. 6 months later, I received photos of their completed project along with a note thanking me for helping them create exactly the home they'd envisioned. The results were stunning: a Mediterranean revival house that honored its 1925 origins while providing everything a contemporary couple could want for entertaining daily living and connection with the beautiful landscape David had designed around the building. Looking at those photos, I reflected on how far all of us had traveled since that awkward evening in the bridal suite at Tyler's wedding. Jessica had found a partner who appreciated her passion for architectural preservation and supported her vision for creating beautiful homes. Tyler was presumably happy with someone whose expectations aligned better with his capacity for growth and change. And I had built a career that combined professional expertise with personal satisfaction in ways I'd never imagined possible when I'd first started Rodriguez Renovations. The preservation consulting work continued to expand, bringing me to historic properties throughout Northern California and connecting me with property owners who shared my commitment to architectural stewardship. Each project taught me something new about construction techniques, regional architectural styles, or approaches to balancing preservation with practical needs. But the most important lesson had come from that first complicated consultation with Tyler and Jessica: that excellent work mattered more than recognition, that professional integrity could transcend personal complications, and that focusing on what a building needed was often the clearest path through human complexity. Standing in my office one evening in late autumn, looking at photographs from dozens of preservation projects displayed on the walls around me, I felt profound gratitude for the unexpected journey that had brought me to this point. Rodriguez Renovations had become everything I'd hoped it could be. The preservation consulting work was making a real difference in protecting California's architectural heritage, and I was surrounded by colleagues and clients who valued the same things that mattered most to me. The path hadn't been straightforward, and some of the most important growth had come through situations that felt impossible at the time. But every challenging project had taught me something valuable, every difficult client interaction had developed skills I didn't know I needed, and every successfully completed restoration had reinforced my sense that this work was exactly what I was meant to be doing. Tyler's house would always hold a special place in my professional memory, not because of the personal drama surrounding it but because it had been the project that taught me to trust my expertise regardless of external circumstances. Every historic building deserved thoughtful preservation, every property owner deserved knowledgeable guidance, and every restoration project deserved my best work, no matter how complicated the human elements might be. That was the foundation Rodriguez renovations had been built on, and it was the principle that would continue to guide my work as California's preservation consulting program grew and evolved in the years ahead. Sometimes the most important professional lessons came disguised as personal challenges, and sometimes the most satisfying career achievements grew out of the most complicated client relationships. But excellent work endured long after the human drama faded away, creating beauty and preserving history for generations of families who would live in homes that honored both their architectural heritage and their contemporary dreams. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.